thank you for the warm welcome. That started actually in less than 30 seconds in my case, ever since I stepped my foot here on the campus. So I have to say, though, he's an arm twister. And like we said with Dean Landman, we still are healing our arms. Because this started like, oh, I have this. Let me say my side of the story of this meeting a few months ago. Because he's repeating ever since dinner this 30-second line, which is good, but it's not the full story. So there he was, and he presented me the first symposium last year on Egypt. And then he said, oh, that was wonderful, and had big success. So I thought, what's next is Ancient Greece. And he said, you know, the line of futuristic look through ancient lenses. I said, oh, that's tempting. It's a nice fresh perspective. And he's a technology professor, and I have a soft spot for people who are in technology, maths, and all that, coming from humanities, because I love maths, and I believe in a structured, well-structured mind, like ancient Greeks, as I will say in a while. And we started discussing a little bit, and he said, oh, how can we support that? I said, of course we will support that, everything we can do, you have a very good idea. And after a certain point, it came, are you coming to say something? And I said, yeah, if my schedule permits, and because it's 3 hours drive, and it's not that easy. And then one thing led to the other, and I found myself having 2 speeches. He threatened me of 40 minutes each, which is like kill a diplomat. I mean, if you want really to kill me, you ask me to do that in an audience of professors and experts. So, because our art is the exact opposite, is how to speak briefly. Not to tire the audience, say everything we want in 1 or 2 phrases, and end with it. Our rule is, in our line of work, the more you talk, the more things you don't want you're gonna say. So there we are, and then I was thinking, how can one do that in 2 parts without overlapping, being a non-expert, talking to experts? That's a hard dilemma to solve. Plus, he gave me the kind of framework of the subject, which I'll read it to you, and you tell me. A 21st century look at ancient Greece, quest for truth, meaning, knowledge, and wisdom, and its effects on subsequent human civilization. That's as vast as the creation of the world. We start with Genesis. There was chaos. So, let's try and see how we'll do that in 2 parts, so that nobody gets bored. Plus, some of you feel tempted to come tomorrow as well. That's also an art of diplomats, you know. To start with, let's start with the picture. This is a wonderful, actually, it's a wonderful program you created here. And we as consulate, we have nothing to do with that. It's all the university is doing. And I want deeply to thank you for this invitation and for holding this symposium here on ancient Greece, because it gives us a rare opportunity to discuss the essence of being Greek and of our civilization, and not be, you know, like trapped in the current snapshots that sometimes can be misleading, or almost all the times. So this is a picture fascinating for every tourist, I guess, from what I hear, but fascinating for us Greeks as well. So the difference, like I was saying to some people earlier, is that my view on this is different than yours in one respect. That it's like my mother tongue. I don't have a first impression of this picture. It's with me ever since I was born. I was born in Athens. So it's like Greek to me, or English to you. I mean, you can't remember when you started hearing this language and understanding this language. That's a big difference amongst us. And the other thing that is, so to start with, I'm biased. So whatever I say on ancient Greece and the way it affected civilizations and the way we can look at it standing here on 2012, of course, it's biased. And the other thing is that I could finish my presentation by stating what some people mentioned to me here earlier. It's the basis of all civilization ever since. End of argument. And then the floor is open to Q&As. I'm sure we will find ways to support this argument. And it will be a little bit like the hero, the father, in a very popular, like 10, 15 years ago movie that was actually shot here in Chicago, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where probably some of you have seen it. Younger people maybe not, but you can find it on YouTube. So the father, the Greek-American immigrant, was stating every other moment that all words derive from Greek. And he was trying to prove his case, sometimes successfully, sometimes he was funny. And I thought maybe that's all I need to do. And then I said, if I go with that statement, I'm immediately betraying the substance of the ancient Greek civilization, let's say of ancient Greece. Let's not use the word civilization for a little while. Because what's the core element of this civilization? It didn't appear like that one day. Of course, it was a step further on steps that have been made before. Other civilizations, but other also expressions and intellectual products in Greece. And so the core element of this and the moment of flourishing was actually Athens in the classical period. Because whenever we talk ancient Greece, of course there is a whole. But what we mostly mean, and all the examples that we present, most of them come from Athens in the classical period. Why is that? Because at that point in time, which is a short point in time for history, you had great minds all concentrated in one town, working together. And working on what? Thinking about the thought, thinking about how we reach awareness and understanding. And that's the miracle of that civilization. And actually, up until 2 days ago, I believed that that's a unique thing. It never happened again. And then, like it was mentioned, I was 2 days ago in St. Louis, at the St. Louis SLU University, like the people there call it, to visit a chair in archaeology with a very prominent archaeologist we have there, a Greek guy. And I had the chance to follow the lecture of a professor from Cambridge, UK, talking about ancient Greek thought, Plato, Aristotle, and the neurons, the theory of neurons. So it was really technical but fascinating. And he mentioned this, Professor Fokas mentioned this. He said, the same thing happened in history, once again, what happened in classical Athens. And that was Vienna at the turning of, at the end of the 19th century. Vienna Fantasiatum. A small town had big minds, all there working to the same direction. It was the second time that happened. Still, we don't really have this so much in our mind, because in Athens it was the first times always count, and it was unique at that point of human history and development of human thought. And this is something for us to consider and try and approach. I wouldn't say analyze. Analyze is too much. And so we can start from the general acceptance that the Greek civilization has formed the basis of what we call, of course, Western civilization, the civilization we are in, and that actually includes the arts, science, but also the organizing of our political system as well. And the thing is that it was based, like I said, in discovering the way we think, the way we capture and we understand the world. One could then say, going to the subject we have, we are in front of the first word, the quest for truth. And we can find a very prominent example that everybody will know, Oedipus, the hero of the tragedy. He is the personification of the absolute quest for truth at a very high personal cost. His quest of truth drove him to his personal misery and blindness as a punishment for his quest of truth. Regardless, he was never sorry he pursued this way. If we look at Oedipus, we might say that this is the spirit of ancient Greece, the quest for truth. But the thing is then, what is truth? Because we need to define. We always talk about, we use words that we think they are very well known, but we never stop a little bit, step aside and see what we really mean. So definitions are important. My thought is, though, so in order to approach this vast, the creation of the world subject I was given by my friend Lafek, so to say, let's have it in 3 parts. You won't hear all 3 parts tonight. Don't you worry. First thing is the definition. Let's see what we are talking about. Second thing is to see what's the subsequent effects on subsequent human civilization, what we really mean by that. And the third part is how we look back to this from the standpoint we are, the 21st century and the current situation we are in. And I will concentrate more on the first part tonight to see how we define things. We started by saying already, what do we mean by ancient Greece? We mean the peak of the civilization that was actually, it happened in the classical period of Athens. What is truth? We said it's the quest for truth. Truth is actually the property, according to the dictionary, of being in accord with fact or reality. Meaning, it's the logical connotation of a word or a phrase. Knowledge is the fact or condition of being aware of something, and wisdom is an accumulated philosophic or scientific learning. So, somehow, these 4 words, by their definition, they are interconnected and complementary. We are looking, let's say, ancient Greece and the interaction that had for something that is in accord with facts, that is truth, has a logical connotation. We want to have awareness of it, that is, understand it, and through this accumulated awareness, reach wisdom. So we could say that our itinerary leads to the Greek quest for wisdom. And in a way, this is true. This quest for wisdom has been the core element of the Greek civilization. And the classic works that made them actually rather unique, at least in the era, because we have to go back at the moment they appeared on the face of the earth, they focused on the individual and the individual's quest. You can see that on every expression, big in literature. That's where you had theater. You had tragedy and comedy. They brought on the forefront individuals and characters. And the ancient Greeks started not only thinking about the way of thinking and how you acquire your awareness, the mechanics of that process, but they went even beyond what we might call, in a kind of artificial divide now, the mind and the emotion. Because they covered both, looking into the individuals. They were even trying to see the emotional struggle of the individuals, because this is also understanding, knowledge, and wisdom. They didn't see the divide that we needed to do afterwards in order to deepen into our knowledge. And actually, they reached the point of maturity that it's repeated also afterwards by intellectuals, that the only thing you know, the start of knowledge, is the acceptance that you know nothing. That's at least what Plato tells us that Socrates' belief was, since we don't have a primary source there. And it's the famous Greek word, that's the only Greek probably you will hear from me tonight, en ida ouden ida, which means the only thing I know is that I know nothing. And that's the point for an individual to start the quest for truth and knowledge. That means no preconditions, no ideas before that. That's why I proposed, let's start by defining what we're talking about, so that we are sure that we talk about the same things. And this is the only way of reaching understanding. Like I said, though, what is important also was that they went beyond science. Up until that point, mostly, and the experts should forgive me if I'm mistaken here, there was, of course, a quest and a struggle of several civilizations, Greek included, to understand and explain the world. That could be through the myths, that could be through scientific attempts. But and there were also descriptions of emotions. Homer's works are full with descriptions of emotions and visceral reactions. But in classical Athens, we reached the point where people asked themselves. They tried to go deep into human soul and see why these things happened. And in this quest, they made a very interesting passage. They connected truth and beauty. And that's obvious in all works, in literature, in architecture, in painting, in sculpture. Because there they made a connection that we see again. And I mean, that's also one of my inspirations of the lecture I referred to 2 days ago. I had totally forgotten, but there is a ode by Keats, the famous Romantic poet. Ode on Aggression Urn. Even the title is rightful so. And there he says, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. Ancient Greece made this connection and this passage, and this is probably what makes it so admired by everyone. Harmony and beauty were always present along with the quest for truth and the scientific progress. And that, or what I already mentioned, shows that Greece, ancient Greece, was present ever since in human civilization. This by itself, it's not unique. Nothing is born out of nothing. We step on what has been done before us. And normally progress comes with really small steps we're not aware of, and we reach a further point in time. So, of course, ancient Greece was founded on what has already been done and on the influence it had from several meetings with other civilizations they had all around the Mediterranean. But they made this wonderful match to start with, and it was so big and important that was kept in the impression of people, and it was a point of reference of several civilizations. In a way, ancient Greece, the production, the intellectual production, is something you find in front of you on every step in famous works on every part of arts, in the science, even the today science. I'll go back to this lecture. I owe this professor a lot for tonight, because he made a parallel. You know, he went on the debate between Plato and Aristotle. So whether we have the ideas when we're born, or we are tabula rasa, we start from scratch. How do we acquire awareness? And actually, he presented a very good case with the theory of neurons and how we react to between our brain getting an information and us getting aware of it. And he found a place for both of them. So his main argument was they're both right even by today's science findings, but they were both of them referring at a different stage of acquiring knowledge. It is a little bit like if you are in Greece, and I guess maybe in Egypt, but I'm talking about Greece today, and every step you make, you find something from the ancient past. You find a ruin. We have a saying in Greece, if you dig, you will find a relic from the past at any point. It's like this one, you know, you can see this picture from very crowded streets in Athens with sometimes ugly buildings, and you can step on it while you are in shops, and suddenly you raise your hand and you see that. That's the thing also with Greek civilization. It finds itself on every step we make because it influenced a lot. So my theory would be that there is a very concrete influence of ancient Greece, as we described it though, I mean the core elements of Greece, on all civilization. And I can give you a short preview. Let's say what's happening tonight that's important for the US. It's the first presidential debate, and yet you're all here. I really appreciate that. So, what's the root of this debate? It's the dialectic method and the dialogue that was established in Greece. It was presenting arguments on a case, and the person who would make the better case would win, actually regardless of the substance of the case. Because what is important is the way you present your case, and this is pure logic. So I think that this is the preview for the subsequent civilization, and I owe you also a preview, before I open the floor to Q&As, to the way we can see ancient Greece from 21st century, standing from here. I would say that what we just said about the truth and how we acquire knowledge, which means the quality of a person's mind, and the quality of a person's mind is actually equals the quality of a person, was the most important value. And maybe this is something to consider today on the 21st century, where sometimes we have different priorities, or we think we have. So I think that will be all for tonight. Otherwise, nobody will be here tomorrow. And the floor is yours. It's the first time people want to share them.
So, as a mathematician, I appreciate the paradoxes that were introduced by Greek mathematicians and philosophers, like Zeno's paradox, for example, which later could be resolved because people were able to sum infinite series. It's actually a little deeper than that. But so, in your profession, as diplomat, you're dealing with unresolved issues all the time. So, how do you view in terms of history, the idea of the resolution of Greek paradoxes as they have come, and then how that has part of your culture, how does that influence you as a diplomat in terms of seemingly paradoxical situations you have to deal with, perhaps on a regular basis?
Oh, that was a tougher question than what I expected. I thought it would be an ancient Greece, so I could say, I'm not an expert, I have an answer for you, but you can ask the experts in the room. Well, that's true. Well, we have to say that the ancient world, ancient Greece, had a culture in solving paradoxes through dialogue. At least that's what we know about that. And we kind of believe it because it's on every work that has come up until these days. So, what was the key on that? It was that you had a society where logic was prevailing and they were sharing this common value. Plus, you had a society where there was a very clear distinction between right and wrong, law and respect for the law, and a certain consensus on how the state, the city-state back then, has to be ruled, and a code of honor, let's say, that everybody would follow. We just had a discussion. Socrates, according to what we know, preferred to die in order to respect the court ruling, though he believed it was deeply wrong and unjust. And Aristides, there is this story, they had a voting system, and when there was a vote for him to be ostracized, to be kicked out of Athens in exile, he stepped on a guy who didn't know which vote to cast, and he asked for his help. And the vote this person wanted to cast was a vote against Aristides, and he could cheat. And many names can come up to our mind that would cheat in such a situation. But he preferred to do the right thing, and he got ostracized. So that's a code of honor and the decency that was a kind of common understanding and acceptance. You need this environment to be able to solve paradoxes through a pure logical process. So, do us, diplomats, or you, faculty and academics, meet in our job? No, it would be a lie to say that we are faced all the time with that. But what is true to say is that if we want to be good in our work, we need to try and create such an environment. Because what is our job? Our job is several things, and I don't think it's easy to describe in a way. That's why people on the street say, what are you actually doing for a living? You can't say, I'm building something, I'm creating something. But a big part of our job is communicating with others. And that's also what negotiation is all about, communicating with people when you negotiate. So if you want to be successful in this, which is a core activity of our job, you need to be able to see through the issues at stake on a purely logical way and try and deconstruct them so that you know how to move and how to address the other party. The good thing in this job is, if you do that with counter-diplomats, they have the same technique. So in a way, we can kind of recreate this environment where you can talk logic. The thing is, of course, then how this all leaves the room and goes out into real life to be implemented. But that's a big story.
That was an empty job. So I just have I don't think it's kind of dangerous. Observations are always dangerous, right? Because they're your own, and so you put yourself in a position when you do that. I have some family who is Greek, and I also have visited and have friends who are Greek, so I'm going to try not to make overgeneralizations. Having said that, it has been my experience and my observation that from the beginning, whatever you want to call even early Greek Bronze Age, there's this notion of individual excellence without pressure for other people to necessarily buy into or be pressured into conformity with your way of thought, which is in some ways how you think about thinking develops, because it is your own thought process, right? And so for me, I see if you want to call it classical Greek society, and then through the classical period, more organic in its development over time. And so I wonder then and then having been to Greece and having spent a little time there, my question then for you as a diplomat, when the European Union sort of came into being, what would you say was one of the greater challenges for you as a diplomat and for those people who you represent, in your thinking about some of the other countries in the European Union and their rigidity to rules and conformity to specific ways of thought, and what you had to do or how you managed to bridge that and become a part of the EU successfully? It's a really roundabout question. Am I there?
I think for me it's kind of easy. I thought you scared me with introduction.
Sorry.
I'm joking, but it's good when you start introducing something like, I don't know if this is dangerous, then whatever you get after that is far better than what you anticipate. So, to start with, I'll make a quick observation, since we talk about ancient Greece, for what you rightfully mentioned about the Bronze Age and the, prior stages to classical era. Yeah, you're right, it was focused on the individual, but the way it was focused on the individual and the way the individual was progressively liberated is pretty obvious if you check the sculptures. If you see the sculpture of the Kouros and Kori, where they wouldn't even move their hands, yes, they were very rigid without any, just the one leg was proceeding, and the hands were right on the side and everything. And then you see how this is liberated and how you have movement and freedom in the classical era. That tells you how ancient Greece evolved in this period and how it reached its peak there, where freedom, grace, and beauty were both present in one combination. I'm closing the parenthesis, I'm not avoiding the subject. So, going to the EU question, for me and for a diplomat of my generation and younger, I joined the service in late '92. That was a given. Greece is a fully fledged member of the European Union ever since '81. So we had already the culture of working together. And what I can tell you is, and this is true, I know it sounds like the good talk of diplomats amongst them, but it's true that we have, since there are several layers of cooperation amongst European Union countries, even within and especially within the foreign services, it comes natural to us to have a double layer feeling. Of course, you always represent your own country and your own national interests, that's a given. But at the same time, you're also a European representative, since there is a lot of common values and common achievements that we defend together. And so in this respect, I can tell you it was not difficult at all. What you need to, of course, to face, and this is with the joint diplomatic service, because ever since Lisbon Treaty, this is the mumbo jumbo now of the diplomat 2010, European Union has started creating, and it's now up and running, a common, let's say, foreign service. That means that you have units, representations of European Union. There is one in Washington, DC, where you have diplomats from several member states, all of them working in a unit representing the union. Of course, if you work with people from different countries, there is always a difference of culture, mindset, and the work system that you have to overcome. But isn't that what you're doing here with international students or visiting professors or professors coming from another country? I'll tell you this, one of the best things about this job is the fact that you expose yourself to different countries, to different mentalities and ways of life, not as a tourist, not as a visitor, as a person who comes and lives for 3 or 4 years in its country. And that means that you develop a broader conscience to work with people that are different. Actually, different is not new to us, it's welcome. I know it's a really good answer, but it's true.
I surely appreciate all of your information about ancient Greece, which is of interest to everyone here. However, there's also great interest in current Greece, a country that seems to be leading the European Union in the wrong direction because of high unemployment, 27%. That's the most recent number I know. Decline in GDP, 13% and projected out not well. 2 bailouts from the IMF and the European Central Bank. Another bailout dependent on you folks doing some further austerity on top of much austerity. So surely the subject of this meeting is ancient Greece, but would you want to touch on current Greece?
Yeah, sure. To bridge it with the subject and help it a little bit, I would say, like I said, ancient Greece is actually present since we're talking about a country which is on the same geography, speaks the same language and lives amongst, and it's the same country. Continuity has something to do with the way you handle the present. That's also a preview of tomorrow. But I'll tell you this, the economic crisis, the last 3 years, is the way that Europe, and mainly the south of Europe, is portrayed in the media. Everybody understands the reason, although sometimes there was some press coverage that didn't do justice to what is really happening, but we all understand how those things work. I would say, though, this, the countries of the south, and of course Greece as well, since this is the question you have, are not portrayed just out of the economic crisis effects. Because this is as if you take one moment of somebody's moving. Let's say we have here a video tape. If we stop it on a snapshot, you can see amazing expressions or faces or whatever you want. This is what happens if you just say, oh, what is happening these 2 or 3 years? I don't want to diminish the effects of the crisis. The crisis is severe and it's a European issue. Why I'm saying that? We were just discussing about European Union. European Union is a whole. That means that you decide on the 17, if you talk about the Eurozone or with the total of the members, if you talk about the Union. That means that every problem that is faced by 1, 2, 3, now 4 or 5 countries, it has to be saved on a whole. Maybe that's a way that it's not totally understood on the other side of the Atlantic. We always know that there is a thing, how do you do things in Brussels? Plus, maybe it's not the way what we call the markets would want it to be. But what I can tell you is this. Of course, it has taken its toll on all countries of the South. Actually, I don't know who is higher on unemployment. I think Spain is still, but there is no competition there. This is not a way, it's not a field we want to compete. But what I'm saying is this, there is an austerity program for the last 3 years. You mentioned bailout, I will say, yeah, that's the way it's presented, but it's actually loans with interest rates. Because sometimes when people hear bailout, they think it's grants. It's no grant. It's money, borrowed money, loans with interest rate higher than the rate that the countries borrow money that lend us back, so there is a profit there. But that's business. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying this is how business works, okay? And what I'm saying is that there is the first thing to do in an economic crisis when there is debt is you need the quick fix first. What's the quick fix? Is to cut down the deficit. And that shows immediate results, and it has shown. I can tell you that actually, since we're talking about Greece, Greece has achieved the biggest cut on budget deficit that ever happened in a country these past 3 years. And actually in August already, there was a primary budget surplus. But of course, this is never enough. You cannot go on with cuts all the way. So the other thing that helps are the structural reforms, what we call the structural reforms, so that you regenerate the economy. And the structural reforms have this thing. They don't show result immediately, like budget cuts. It takes time. Well, the good news is that we are 3 years after the beginning of the crisis. That means that the reforms start showing results. And so the big bet now is that you can at the same time regenerate the economy so that people can also see the difference, and you take the other trend now, the trend going out of the crisis. What we can, though, repeat and connect with the subject of the symposium is Greece has faced, like every country, we're not alone in that, several crises in history. 3 years in history is a very short time. For people, it's a big time. I know that. But what I'm saying is this. Europe, Greece and Europe, has been faced with really bad crises, as we all know in this room. So I'm convinced that this will be a crisis to be overcome pretty soon.
We hope so.
Everybody.
Comments, questions, concerns? I think you answered so well that they're speechless.
That's another word, physically.
Thank you so much, and you have just encouraged us to join you in the morning at 10 o'clock in the 4440 upstairs on the 3rd floor here in the library, and we will bring the story forward as it is. Thank you so much. Well, this concludes our evening. You're welcome to stay and talk, ask more questions. There are still refreshments and baklava and other things in the lobby. Please feel free to stop by there and make new friends. We'll see you at other occasions in this series, and thank you so much.